Good night, good night, good night, St. Lucia. Good night to everyone who has joined me on this live. Good night, St. Lucia. We at 1.1K viewers, 1,100 live viewers, plus many more watching who are too afraid to click. We had over 1,000 views, 1.1K views going into the show tonight, because what is going to happen tonight is long overdue. Long overdue. Somebody has to belt the cat. Folks, please do not call me. Please don't message me right now. I am going in. I am laser focused. Do not call me. Do not message me. Just get on the live, okay? We are 1.1K. I am laser focused. I am going in. I am doing what should have been done years ago, okay? Listen, and people have called me today. Various people have called me. Please do not put anybody's fears on me. God did not give me the spirit of fear. God gave me the spirit of boldness. And I am doing what should have been done years ago. I don't have a spirit of fear. I don't have a spirit of intimidation. I do not cower to bullies. As a matter of fact, bullies and the intimidation tactics fuel me. So please, people, do not put fears on me. If you have a government minister that you are afraid of, that you have to be calling people to say, don't say this and that, because of fear of your life or your family's life, you have a serious problem, St. Lucia. If you are in fear for me or anybody around me because of what I will do tonight, then you, St. Lucia, have this on your conscience. If you have an elected member, if you have a minister of government sitting in cabinet, you have to be calling people to say, you are in fear for me because of what I will do tonight. St. Lucia, this is on your conscience. If you have a government minister sitting in the House of Parliament and you fear for my life tonight because of me challenging him, then St. Lucia, I challenge your conscience. Now, before we start, I want y'all to target. We are 1.3K views right now. I want you to tag Richard Frederick's Trinidadian lawyer. His name is Anand Ramlogan. A-N-A-N-D. Ramlogan. R-A-M-L-O-G-A-N. That is the lawyer who Richard said he has hired with his team from Trinidad for me. I want you to tag him right now. Tag him. Tag him right now, because I want him to hear what I have to say tonight. And I Googled him. I Googled Anand Ramlogan. And listen, folks, while you chat with me tonight, Google him. His name is A-N-A-N-D. His last name, R-A-M-L-O-G-A-N. Google him. You will see the lawyer Richard has hired to head his team of a defamation against me. You will see the character. All I will say about that is birds of a feather flock together. You will see the things associated with his name. Birds of a feather flock together. Tag him. I want him to hear what I have to say about Richard Frederick tonight. Because if you, Richard Frederick, think you will intimidate me tonight, you will not. I am coming to do what should have been done a long time ago. Because you are fake, you are a fraud. And I'm coming to deal with you, Richard Frederick, tonight. I'm going to start slow. I'm going to start slow. I'm going to start slow. I'm going to calm it down and start slow. I'm going to take it down a notch. As you can see, I'm very passionate about this. I'll tell you why. Because for years, Richard has gone unchallenged. For years, Richard Frederick has gone unchallenged in St. Lucia. People are afraid of Richard. People are afraid of Richard, and I'll tell you why. Because as soon as you say something about Richard, he goes onto his show every Thursday night and he bashes, attacks, insults, demeans, berates, attack you personally, attack your family, attack everybody. So people are afraid of him. Even those who dare challenge Richard, once he goes on his show and lambaste, people back off. But let me tell you, Richard Frederick, I, Minerva, do not cower. I do not cower. As a matter of fact, you see what you do? This fuels me. The opposite of what you thought would have happened, happened. I do not have, the intimidation gene is not in me. I do not cower. It fuels me it fuels me. I cannot stand bullies like you. I have seen you go on your show for years and berate people. Anybody who dare challenges you, you go and attack them and sully their names. You go after their families. You destroy people. I need to calm down because I am very passionate tonight. This should have been done a long time ago. And I am going to do it tonight. You are a bully. So not only do you go on your show, but everybody calls around. Oh, Richard Frederick, he will send his boys for you. He'll send his boys for you. He will send your boys for your family. He will send your boys for you. Richard, we all have to die. And we only die once. I am not afraid of you. I am not afraid of you, Richard Frederick. I am not afraid of you. You're a bully. And you deal with all bullies the same way. You go after them. Bullies don't like you don't like people standing up to them. And I'm standing up to you tonight. I am standing up to you tonight, Richard Frederick. And every St. Lucia needs to stand up to you, including Philippe, our Prime Minister. Including Philippe, who our Prime Minister, who's told people he doesn't know what to do with you. Who has told people he does not know what to do with you. The Prime Minister of the country has somebody in his cabinet who he admits he doesn't know what to do with. I will do tonight what Philippe should be doing. But I need to calm down and start slow. I am taking it down and I'm starting slow. Y'all tag Anan Ramlogan. If y'all have not tagged him, tag him now. 1.6K. 1.6K views. Richard, you like to boast about views? I don't care about views. 1.7K. You had 1.1K last night. I have 1.7 right now, okay? Ridiculous for you to be talking about views. But since you're talking about it, I'm talking about it. I'm at 1.7K. You had 1.1 last night. I come in for you, Richard. Let me start off the economy. Let me debunk some of the garbage Richard talks about. Before I get into him, I want to address a couple matters. Because Richard thinks he's an authority on things like the economy. I don't know where because Richard talks a bunch of caca. Richard talks a bunch of caca. A man who doesn't even understand economics. A man who does not even understand economics is always going on his show and talking crap about St. Lucia has the 7th highest GDP growth rate in the world for 2023 or 2022. Richard, where you get that figure from? Let me explain the economy to you because you do not understand economics and neither does Philippe. You all like to say Philippe is an economist. Philippe is not an economist. Philippe recently admitted he knows very little about economics. If you listen to one of his speeches about a few weeks ago, he has admitted he knows very little about economics. Philippe is an accountant by profession. And Richard, I don't know why you think an accountant and an economist are the same. They're not. An accountant and an economist are two separate things. Philip is an accountant. He is not an economist. He has never worked as an economist. He doesn't understand economics. He doesn't understand the basic tenets of economics. And neither do you. So you need to stop beating your trap like you understand economics. Because when I hear the garbage you spew to the people who do not know better, and you repeat it, you see, that's a tactic. That's your tactic. You repeat it so many times, people believe it's true. Let me explain something to you. Let me finally respond to this, because I've heard you talk that garbage and nobody's responded. Let me respond to you. During COVID, let me explain economics to you, Richard Frederick. Let me explain economics to you. Because yes, I have done economics in my first degree. I have done economics in my second degree, my first master's. My second master's, which I am now doing, is in economic development. So let me explain something about economics to you. Let me school you. Let me school you. Yes, the master's I'm doing now is in economic development. Let me school you. My second master's. In St. Lucia during COVID, when you have business closures, when your country has shut down, when your main industry, tourism, has come to a grinding halt, yes, we will see GDP decline. Yes, we will see negative GDP growth. Yes, that is expected. The world shut down during COVID. Our airport was closed for a while, and even after it opened, it took months for flights to come back. Our tourism industry, that Philip admits he knows nothing about, he does not understand, that you guys, when you're in opposition, wanted to keep shut. We had to manage that. We had to manage our tourism industry to eventually get it reopened with safety protocols. Quarantining when visitors come in, they still have to stay in a COVID certified hotel. All of that people have to go through. Y'all are forgetting what happened just 3 years ago. That is what St. Lucia went through. So yes, our GDP declined like everywhere else in the world. We are a tourism-based economy. Let me explain to you, Richard Frederick. You do as if you're talking as if our GDP decline in 2020 was as a result of some failure Alan Chastney did. Our GDP decline was a direct result of our dependency on tourism and the fact that our industry was closed for months. You're talking about our level of borrowing during COVID. Let me school you again on that. Because I've heard you talk so much garbage and spew so much nonsense to the people who follow you. Yes, we had to borrow during COVID. Yes. But let me tell you where that money went. That money went into paying civil servants because Alan Chastney was very, very, very clear. We had a budget deficit. Our revenues declined so much and could not meet our expenses. We had a budget deficit during COVID as expected as everywhere else in the world. We did not have money to pay civil servants. But we did it. We never missed a beat paying civil servants. All the funds we borrowed for COVID paid salaries, paid hospitals, opened OKEU, converted Victoria Hospital into a respiratory hospital, paid for the quarantine hotels, shutting people in schools. He put people in hotels with 3 squared meals a day, internet, everything. I saw complaints in the rest of the Caribbean where people were put into schools, the conditions are poor. That's not how we operate. People coming back were put into hotels to quarantine. How do you think that was paid for? How do you think the boats, the marine police boats that were circling St. Lucia 24/7 to prevent people from coming through the back door from Martinique, how do you think the gas, the engines and stuff were paid for? By the borrowing. How do you think the road programs and all of the infrastructure programs that was going on to keep St. Lucians employed, how do you think they were paid for? When I was saying people don't eat roads, the roads were feeding people. But y'all guys played so much politics with COVID. Y'all guys played so much politics with COVID. You wanted Alan Shaston to shut down our tourism industry, to put tourism employees out of work. Shaston said, yes, we have made arrangements at NIC to pay people for 3 months, but we cannot pay people indefinitely. We have to open and open safely. We have to manage lives and livelihoods. You guys don't understand that. In fact, you understood. But you're playing dirty politics. And that's why I could never forgive the Labour Party. I'm telling you, I supported the Labour Party in the past, but I could never forgive the Labour Party. Because you played politics with the lives of St. Lucians. And that's why I could never, ever, ever forgive you guys. Y'all did not care if St. Lucians died. Y'all did not care if St. Lucians died. You were too busy playing dirty politics with a global pandemic, a public health crisis, an economic crisis to win an election. You don't care if St. Lucians died. And 500 St. Lucians died under your watch. Including single mothers whose children are alive today without a mother. Thanks to you, Labour Party. I blame y'all. Y'all could not care at what cost y'all got into office. Y'all played dirty politics. So yes, that's where the borrowing went into. That is where the borrowing went into. To keep our country afloat, to keep people working, even during the worst pandemic. Alan Shaston said to y'all, COVID will not last forever, but we need to keep our country open. We need to keep our borders open. We need to have people come in safely. But we need to keep people working. We need to keep people employed. We need to balance lives and livelihoods. Y'all twisted that phrase around to mean that Shaston only cared about money. It was not money in his pocket. Shaston don't need this money in his pocket. It was about the money in the pockets of St. Lucians. The average St. Lucian working in a hotel or working in a restaurant or working on a road project. Y'all did not care. Y'all demonized Alan Shaston for your dirty politics. And now y'all are in. What are y'all doing? Now y'all are in. What are y'all doing? The country's in the worst state all of us have ever seen it, including the Labour Party supporters who can tell you, if they are honest, they will tell you it's the worst they have ever seen in St. Lucia. Be honest with yourself. So yes, our economy contracted during COVID like everywhere else in the world except Guyana because they discovered oil. And that's where our borrowing went. Yes, we had a high debt to GDP ratio, but before COVID, we had less than 60%, which by any means, it was within the guidelines. We went up to 97% during COVID. Of course, because our GDP declined. I have explained this many times. But people prefer to listen to a Richard Frederick who does not even understand the basics of economics. So when Richard Frederick and the Labour Party will boast about economic growth, when Richard Frederick and the Labour Party will boast about economic growth, let me tell you something about where this economic growth is coming from. This economic growth we are seeing, first of all, it's a leveling out. So our economy declined, and now because things, Alan Shaston, thank God he never listened to you. Thank God he never listened to you guys, visionless men. he kept the economy open. So now things are back to normal. It's leveling out. So it went down, and of course things are coming back because we kept the economy open and they are leveling out. So this upward trajectory is growth. Went down during COVID, so this was the decline. Went up now, so what they're measuring is this, and now it's leveling it out. But these guys want to come and brag about the economy has growth. This has nothing to do with them. That has nothing to do with them. This is what Alan Chastney was telling you guys all along about we need to keep our country open. Guys, I will get to Richard Frederick. I know you all came in here to hear about Richard Frederick. I will get to that, but I need to address these things first because too many people are fooled by the nonsense. That economic growth has nothing to do with the Labour Party. That was strategic and deliberate actions to leave our country open during COVID. And Alan Chastney said it repeatedly. COVID will not last forever. We need to position our country to come out of COVID strong. And that is exactly how we've come out. And let me tell you something. We would have come out stronger if this Labour Party government did not stop all the infrastructure projects that were going on. But when you want to come and boast about we're the 7th fastest highest GDP in the world, let me tell you something. There is nothing this Philippine government has done to account for any level of growth. First of all, to see GDP growth in the country, you have to see capital works. You have to see infrastructure works. If that is not there, do not expect to see growth. And as Philippe just admitted in his budget, the opening of budget yesterday, that we were not able to get the capital works project started. St. Jude's, almost 2 years in, is at a standstill. No work has been done on St. Jude's. Hiranora Airport, no work has been done. Alan Chastney left Hiranora with piling going on. We are well on our way to having a world-class hospital on our airport and the hospital. This government has come and shut down everything, making people unemployed. All the people who were employed on these projects are now unemployed. St. Jude's, Hiranora, all the road work projects. I was in St. Lucia for Christmas. I was appalled to see the state of the Millennium Highway. I was appalled to see the state of the Grosley Highway, especially by our main tourism artery, Rodney Bay. So you have the Millennium Highway, the main artery to Castries. A disaster, a hot mess. Our Millennium Highway, our Millennium Highway that John Compton built so that people could avoid having to go up the Mon. Now people have to go up the Mon. Our main artery to our city is a disaster. Rodney Bay is our tourism hub. Our artery to Rodney Bay is a disaster to the point that the residents of Cap Estate, Rodney Bay, Bonse, etc. have to put a sign by the highway saying, fix our highway. That is the state St. Lucia is in. That is where we have fallen to. So where's the growth coming from? What economic activity has this government done? What economic activity? Somebody please tell me, what economic activity has these guys done that they could be taking credit for any level of economic growth in St. Lucia? Please tell me somebody. The country is at a standstill. The country is at a standstill. Nothing a running, as we say in St. Lucia. Nothing a running. But you want to take credit for economic growth? That is the country coming back. We are on the upswing from where we went. Thanks to Alan Chastney. Thanks to Alan Chastney. Richard Frederick shows a screenshot. 2,000 live views right now. 2,000 live views. 2,000 live views right now. Richard Frederick says, let me get it for you. Richard Frederick shows this diagram, and I'm sure you've seen this diagram circulating around Facebook. Folks, I'm not digressing. I am responding about some economic things. I am going to get to Richard Frederick, but I need to address this nonsense that he's been spewing first before I get to him. He's been showing this figure, this document, highest GDP growth for 2022, and going about boasting. St. Lucia has the seventh highest in the world. St. Lucia has the seventh highest in the world. St. Lucia has the seventh highest in the world. Guys, I have never heard of this site, Ranking Royals. Ranking Royals. Ranking Royals. What the heck website is that? When I went to look at this Ranking Royals site, guys, listen, the email is contact.rankingroyals@gmail.com. Richard is about the place quoting a website that has a Gmail. That has a Gmail as their email. Contact.rankingroyals@gmail.com. That is the source Richard is quoting from. That is the source Richard is quoting from. Lord help us. Lord help us. Rankingroyals@gmail.com. Richard, quote ECCB, quote IMF, quote World Bank. The other thing I want to get to. So yes, we are on this upswing, but it has nothing to do with the Labour Party government. It has, let me tell you something. You see 2024? You see if 2024, this government is able to achieve any measure of economic growth, I will give them credit. If in 2024, this Labour Party is able to have any measure of economic growth, I will give them credit. But right now, any economic growth we are seeing is simply as a result of our economy reopening after COVID. It has nothing to do with the Labour Party. There are no actions to justify or for them to take any level of credit for. Richard keeps talking about a perception of the corruption index, 2.1K views. Richard keeps talking about this corruption index. And let me tell you, Richard has really fooled y'all, eh? Richard has really fooled y'all. Richard really take y'all for idiots, as they say in Jamaica. Richard takes solutions for idiots. Not for idiots. In Jamaica, we say, they take you for idiots. Folks, let me explain this perception of corruption index to y'all. Folks, the perception of corruption index is by Transparency International. And as the word implies, it is not actual corruption. It is a perception of corruption. It is a perception of corruption. Let me read this for you. The Corruption Perception Index. I know y'all came to hear Roro, and I will get to the Roro in a second. But let me deal with some housekeeping matters first. The Corruption Perception Index that is put out by Transparency International is an index which ranks countries by their perceived. For those of you who don't understand what perceived means means not actual, but believed. For whatever reason, it is believed by their perceived levels of public sector corruption as determined by expert assessments and opinion surveys. Let me tell you something too. The perception index, as Richard Frederick will have us believe, because he's targeting Alan Chastney and Guy Joseph. He's trying to create this narrative of perception around Guy Joseph and secondarily Alan Chastney, or Alan Chastney first and Guy Joseph, whichever. But he's trying to pin the two of them together and create this perception of corruption around them. Listen, first of all, this is not a measure of actual corruption. This is a measure of perceived corruption. And when you have a demon like Richard Frederick, when you have a demon like Richard Frederick, when you have a demon like Richard Frederick beating his tail every Thursday, Alan Chastney, Alan Chastney, Alan Chastney, Alan Chastney, 1,000,000 times in 2 hours, or Guy Joseph, he creates the perception. He creates the perception. But let me tell you too, that perception index is not just about elected officials. Let me explain to you. This perception index is not just about elected officials. It is about the entire public sector. It is not just about those, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, as Richard Frederick would have us believe. That perception index is a measure of the perception of the entirety of the public sector, which includes the police, which includes customs, which includes people who DCA, who have to ultimately decide on building permits. It includes all of that. It does not include just Guy Joseph and Alan Chastney. It includes the entirety of the public service. It includes people's perception about the police. Are they corrupt? It includes people's perception about customs. Are they corrupt? Do they take bribes? Richard Frederick, it includes people's perceptions about customs. Richard Frederick, do they take bribes? Do they turn a blind eye when they come on these stuffed containers, Richard Frederick? Do they take bribes, Richard Frederick? That's what the perception of corruption index is. Are the police in the pockets of politicians? Are the magistrates in the pockets of politicians? The perception of corruption index is not about just the cabinet. It's about the totality of the public service. So do not let Richard Frederick fool you all. And let me tell you this. Let me tell you this. Richard Frederick will have you to believe that St. Lucia's position has improved under this Labour Party government. That is not the fact. That is not the case. Let me tell you, St. Lucia's position on that perception of corruption index our ranking was 56 in 2021. And let me explain to you how this works. 100, so the country which is at 100, which means that there's no perception of corruption. So you want to be higher, not lower. Understand, you want to be higher, not lower. So Denmark, for example, is the perceivedly least corrupt country. Denmark. It was at 88 in 2021. It moved up, so it bettered its position, went up to 90. So it's not perceived as being corrupt. St. Lucia, we had a score of 56. We had a score, let me get it, 56. We had a score of 56 in 2021. We've actually moved down a spot in 2022. So when Richard Frederick will have you believe When Richard Frederick will have you believe that our position has been better than the Labour Party, that's a lie. That is a lie. We've actually moved down from 56 to 55. And remember, 100 is where you want to get. We've actually lost. Okay? Under this Labour Party government. So when Richard wants to tell you about perception of corruption, that is a bull. That's the first part of what I want to talk to you about. The economy, and Richard talking garbage about economic growth and crediting themselves when it cannot be credited. And the second part is his perception of corruption report. Perception of corruption. And let me tell you, overall, St. Lucia is not in a bad position, whether under the last government or this government, to be honest, because Richard Frederick will have to twist the numbers, and of course, St. Lucia's done the research. We do not do research, we just listen and drink all the garbage that Richard Frederick spews. We don't go and read for ourselves, we don't go and research for ourselves. So we just drink the betties he fills us with. But overall, St. Lucia is not in a bad position. Whether UWP or Labour, we're not in a bad position when it comes to the perception of corruption. We are actually, in the world, we are actually number 45. Not bad. Honestly, not bad. A lot of the countries ahead of us are actually places like the European countries, Taiwan, the UAE, Barbados is ahead of us, Bahamas is ahead of us. A lot of European countries, but we're not bad. In terms of our perception of corruption, we're not bad. 45 in the entire world is not a bad position. And again, perception of corruption. So whether Labour Party or UWP, we're not bad. We're doing okay. The countries that are ahead of us are largely European countries. Or countries with a different culture like the UAE with much tighter grips, with much harsher penalties for corruption and stuff. We're not doing that. We're not bad. So Richard Frederick want to spin this and talk about, oh, the guy Joseph, the perception of corruption, and he's showing a paper, the perception of corruption, guy Joseph, oh, guy Joseph, Richard, Alan Chastity. Nonsense. Complete and utter nonsense. 2.2k views. The second thing I will speak to you about, let's get to Richard Frederick now. The second thing I will speak to you about tonight. Let's get to Richard Frederick. Let's get to this character, Richard Frederick. Richard Frederick is the perpetual bully and the perpetual victim. I have never seen a man cry like that. He's a bully on one hand, so he like to give, but he cannot take. I have never seen a man cry like a little I have never seen a man cry like a little itch. I have never seen a man cry like a little itch. Always the victim. Somebody always target him. He never know what happened. His visa get revoked, he never know what happened. His bank account get closed, he never know what happened. Shaggy said it wasn't me, Richard said I don't know. Shaggy said it wasn't me, Richard Frederick said I don't know. I don't know his default excuse. He never know what happened to him. It's always some kind of personal attack on him. It's always some kind of political attack on him. Let me get to Richard Frederick. Y'all, I have documents. I come prepared. But I'm not releasing everything tonight. I'm giving you some tonight. I want to remind y'all first And we're getting there. We're going up a hill. But I need to remind St. Lucians, because nobody wants to touch Richard. Everybody afraid of Richard. Well, I will touch him tonight. Let me see what's going on there. Let me deal with Richard. First thing we saw, I should say first thing. One of the things we saw about Richard was the WikiLeaks cables. Google Richard Frederick. You will see the WikiLeaks cables. Now, folks, let me explain this to you. The U.S. has people planted in St. Lucia. Do not be fooled. The U.S., the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, has people planted in St. Lucia. Not just St. Lucia. There are people planted, and they report back to base. They report back about the political situation in the country, any threats, any perceived terrorism, any threats to national security in the U.S., any drug activity, what the political situation, they report back to the U.S. If you remember, the WikiLeaks documents were leaked cables. So this was whoever was based, whichever U.S. agents were based in St. Lucia, reporting back to the U.S. government. And somebody reminded me today that there are certain names, once they are mentioned online, the U.S. government gets certain information. So the person cautioned me tonight that this live is probably going to get carried over to the U.S. government. And the person cautioned me for myself. I said, I don't need to worry. There have been extensive background checks on me. I'm a secure traveler. I go through the airports in the US and Canada on a secure line. Extensive background checks have been run on me. So I'm not worried about myself. WikiLeaks cables. We are 2.3K views tonight. Pamwekidi. I came with my receipts. Would you like to come with papers? I come with documents too. This according to the WikiLeaks cables. Give me a second, folks. Give me a second. Give me a second. This is WikiLeaks, Richard Frederick. The by-election held March 13th, 2006, to fill a vacant seat in the St. Lucia Parliament was won, and this is a U.S. agent reporting back to the U.S., a U.S. agent reporting back to the U.S. in the cables which were eventually leaked. So we're seeing what they had said to the U.S. government, a U.S. agent. The by-election held March 13 to fill a vacant seat in the St. Lucia Parliament was won by an individual suspected of drug trafficking. Richard Frederick, who ran for the seat as an independent, is currently under investigation. Listen to this. Listen to this. When Richard Frederick will have you believe that everything that happens to him is because of political victimization in St. Lucia, I want you all to listen to this. Richard Frederick, who ran for the seat as an independent, is currently under investigation by U.S. by United States and St. Lucia law enforcement authorities for involvement in trafficking operation. So it's not just St. Lucia authorities, U.S. and St. Lucia authorities for involvement in trafficking operation that uses St. Lucia as a transshipment point for Colombian cocaine. Pamwekidi, an American agent who said it. Pamwekidi. It goes on. The winner of St. Lucia, so that's a later cable. The winner of St. Lucia's March 13th by-election, remember that's 2006? Independent candidate Richard Frederick. And remember, this is not coming from a St. Lucian. This is not coming from a St. Lucian. This is coming from an American reporting back to America. The winner of St. Lucia's March 13th by-election, independent candidate Richard Frederick, is a suspected drug trafficker who is currently under investigation by U.S. and St. Lucia law enforcement authorities. DEA means Drug Enforcement Agency, Bridgetown, reports that Frederick is believed to be involved in a trafficking operation that uses St. Lucia as a transshipment point for Colombian cocaine heading to the U.S. and other destinations. This is the same Richard Frederick who is today in a cabinet of the St. Lucia Labour Party. This is the same Richard Frederick who's in a cabinet of the Labour Party. Folks, grab your wine, get your coffee. We have a lot more ahead of us. We're just getting started. DEA, Drug Enforcement Agencies, Bridgetown, reports that Frederick is believed to be involved in a trafficking operation that uses St. Lucia as a transshipment point for Colombian cocaine heading to the U.S. and other destinations. According to the DEA source, the St. Lucia police were surprised by Richard Frederick's election victory and believe he managed to mobilize. Listen to this. Listen to this. Listen to this and tell me if anything is different from 2006 as it is now. Listen carefully. Écoutez bien. According to the DEA source, the St. Lucia police were surprised by Frederick's election victory and believed he managed to mobilize associates that rank among the more undesirable elements of St. Lucia society to help him win the race. Has anything changed? Has anything changed? A St. Lucia newspaper editor told Poloff, and I don't know who Poloff is, I don't know if he's the American source, that the impoverished constituency won by Frederick is full of bad boys, quote unquote, who turned out to support their candidate. The WikiLeaks goes on to say, how much is known about Frederick? During the course of Frederick's brief election campaign, listen to this, and tell me if anything is different now. Listen to this and tell me if anything is different now. During the course of Frederick's brief election campaign, neither the press nor his opponents raised questions about alleged involvement in drug trafficking, indicating that little may be known about this outside of law enforcement circles. Only one media outlet. Has anything changed? The Cayman Island-based Caribbean Net News included any mention of Frederick's suspected illegal activities in its reporting. The St. Lucia Press, listen to this and tell me, that's 2006, we're in 2023, tell me if anything has changed. The St. Lucian Press however, failed to raise the issue at all. So, listen, this is an issue we all talking about, okay? Let's not pretend. St. Lucians, let us not pretend. Let's not be vicious and hypocritical. Y'all know damn well you're talking about it. You're talking about Richard Frederick and what he may be involved in. Y'all talk about it in your homes, among your friends, in your circles, in your corners. Let's not play hypocritical. We all talking about it. We are all talking about it. Do not play hypocritical. Don't be vicious. The press, Philip Pierre, Kenny Anthony, the Labour Party, the cabinet in which he served, they are all talking about it. It's the elephant in the room. Richard Frederick's perceived, alleged, whatever activities are the elephant in the room. We are all talking about it, but we are talking around it. Nobody is dealing with it. And the article goes, the WikiLeaks cable goes on to suggest why. So the St. Lucian press, however, failed to raise the issue at all. Neither did Frederick's main opponent, 2.4K views. Neither did Richard Frederick's main opponent in the election, former Attorney General Victor Lacobinier, who asked only why Frederick did not address law and order issues such as drugs, illegal weapons, and money laundering during the campaign. One source told Poloff that nothing more than rumors are known about Frederick's supposed illegal activities, which no one dares, listen to me, which no one dares publish or speak about publicly for fear of a libel suit. Is that why I'm not talking? Is that why I'm not talking? Because y'all fear that Richard Frederick is going to bring his team from Trinidad. His legal team from Trinidad, headed by lawyer Anand Ramlogan. Google him, y'all. You will see his background. You will see the things that he has been allegedly involved in. And you will realize birds of a feather flock together. But according to the WikiLeaks cable, no one dares publish or speak publicly for fear of a libel suit, which is the same thing I talked about. Everybody's afraid of Richard. You're afraid he comes on his show and insults y'all and berates y'all. You're afraid I don't know. That's what everybody's afraid of. Every time you talk about Richard, oh, Richard going to send his boys to kill you. Richard going to send his boys to kill you. You know how many calls I got today? Y'all know how many calls I got today? Telling me, people are so fearful about my safety, of what Richard can do to me or my family. People are so fearful of what Richard can do to me or my family. And that's the same thing that WikiLeaks cable is saying. People are afraid. No one dares to publish or speak publicly. So we all speaking privately. We are all speaking privately about what is going on here. Let's not kid ourselves. We are all speaking privately about what is going on here. But no one dares to speak publicly about it because we are afraid of Richard. We are afraid that he comes on his show. We are afraid of his boys. We are afraid that of a libel suit. And we have this person in cabinet that we St. Lucians are afraid of. Let me tell you something. I'm Minerva Ward. I'm not afraid of Richard Frederick. I'm Minerva Ward. I am not afraid of Richard Frederick. He can go on his show. He can rant. He can rage. He can carry on about me. It will not change the price of coffee. It will not get him his US visa back. He can send his boys to me. I only die once, but I guarantee you he will die too. We all have to die. We all going 6 feet under. A libel suit? The lawyer who take this, the lawyer who thinks there's anything defamatory in anything I've said is a jackass. In fact, you're not a jackass. You're a smart person. The lawyer who Richard will pay money. The lawyer who let me say something. Let me change this around. Eat Richard money. Eat his money. If Richard's so stupid, if Richard's so kuyo to think there's anything defamatory in anything I've said, and he thinks that he can win any level of lawsuit against me, eat his money. Lawyers, eat his money. Eat it, eat it, eat it, maje. To stupid idiots. Eat his money. The WikiLeaks cable goes on. How the election to parliament of a suspected drug dealer will play out in St. Lucia remains to be seen, as it is unclear at this time how widely known are the allegations of Richard Frederick. If opposition leader John Compton knew about the charges of criminal activity, this may explain why he refused to anoint Richard Frederick as the UWP's candidate in the by-election. The fact that the press failed to raise serious questions about Frederick suggests, however, that either the allegations against him are not well known, they're known, they are very well known. They are very, very well known. We all know them. Or that St. Lucians may prefer to simply look the other way. The fact that the press failed to raise serious questions about Frederick suggests, however, that the allegations against him are either not well known, so they never said they were not true, you know. They are either not well known, or that St. Lucians may prefer simply to look the other way. That is an indictment on us as St. Lucians. That is an indictment on us as St. Lucians, that we choose to look the other way. From a law enforcement perspective, Richard Frederick's elevation to parliamentarian could make the investigation into the suspected activities more difficult to pursue. Post will continue to report, and I believe post here means posted in St. Lucia, will continue to report on the various aspects of this situation as they develop. Folks, that was what a U.S. agent was reporting back to their head office. I want to remind St. Lucians. I want to remind St. Lucians of what Kenny Anthony told us about Richard Frederick. I want us to remind St. Lucians. The hypocrites in the Labour Party, the hypocrites in the Labour Party, the hypocrites in the Labour Party who are today defending Richard Frederick, who were the same ones. It's a selective morality. Back in 2011, y'all wanted his head because there's no way this person should ever be in the Parliament of St. Lucia. And I agree with y'all. I agreed with y'all when I was supporting Labour Party back then. I agreed with y'all because none about parties is a moral position. There's no way a character like this, should be in our honorable House of Parliament. There is no way. I remind y'all the words of Kenny Anthony. The words of Kenny Anthony for the Labour Party people who want to come and defend this. Not my words, Kenny Anthony's words that Richard Frederick's entry into politics is the scariest thing. And remember, he knew what that one knew, that one knew, that one knew. Up to now, none of us know. Up to now, none of us know. I'm not going to read this. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read this. I want you to go on the government of St. Lucia's page. This was a statement by Dr. the Honorable Kenny Anthony, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, on the allegations of Richard Frederick. It's still on the government of St. Lucia's page. It's dated 4th August 2006. In the interest of time, I will not read it. You know what? I will read sections of it. I will read sections of it. I'll read just parts of it in the interest of time. Because you see, Richard Frederick wants to come for me. He wants to come for me and file a lawsuit against me for defamation. But Richard Frederick does not have clean hands. Because Richard Frederick defames people every single Thursday he's on his show. He has defamed me. Richard Frederick has made the statement that I have stolen money from sandals using credit cards and had to run to Canada. Blatant lie. Not a shred of truth in that. He has stood on his show and defamed me. If you are going to the courts to seek equity, you have to have clean hands. And there are multiple instances in which he has defamed people, including Kenny Anthony. In the same article, I'm not going to read the whole thing, I'm going to read excerpts of it. You could go read for yourself. This is Kenny Anthony. For the public record, I wish to state categorically that I was never involved in an incident, and these were allegations Richard was making about Kenny Anthony. Because let me tell you, let me remind you all, let me give you a little walk down memory lane. You see the same way Richard Frederick goes on his show and he calls Alan Chasney's name 2 million times every Thursday? That is the same thing he used to do to Kenny Anthony. Think back. That is the same thing he used to do to Kenny Anthony. Richard has a very obsessive personality. And the same way he had his tentacles in Kenny Anthony, is the same way as his tentacles in Alan Chasney now. As soon as you stand up to the bully, he comes after you. So he had said a lot of things about Kenny Anthony, and this is Kenny Anthony's response. On the government of St. Lucia page, it is still there. It is still there on the government of St. Lucia's page to the Labour Party people who want to defend their Jim Jones. It's still there. Go and read it for yourself. This is Kenny Anthony. For the public record, I wish to state categorically that I was never involved in an incident, never involved in the incident at the VIP lounge or trafficking of drugs in any way at all. So Richard Frederick accused Kenny Anthony of trafficking in drugs. Richard Frederick, listen to me. Let me get this closer. Let me take off my glasses. I want you all to see this. Richard Frederick accused Kenny Anthony of trafficking in drugs. Richard Frederick accused Kenny Anthony of trafficking in drugs. If that is not called projection, I do not know what is. Richard Frederick accused Kenny Anthony of trafficking in drugs. Projection at his finest. You could accuse Kenny Anthony of many things. I don't think trafficking in drugs is one of them. Projection at its finest. So Kenny Anthony says, I wish to categorically state that I was never involved in the incident in the VIP lounge or trafficking in drugs in any way. Mr. Frederick's statements and the maliciously designed insinuation that I was in any way involved are insidious, dishonest, and totally false. So too is his calculatedly false statement of inference that I was interviewed by Scotland Yard. That statement is manifestly and absolutely false. Richard is a liar. I was never and have never been interviewed or interrogated by Scotland Yard over the incident at the VIP lounge in London, St. Lucia, or elsewhere, or over any matter pertaining to drugs or trafficking in drugs. Richard Frederick was accusing Kenny Anthony of trafficking in drugs. Talk about projection. Y'all ever notice people put their own sins on other people? You ever notice people put their sins on others? The jummets of the world want to call other people jummet. The drug dealers of the world want to call other people drug dealers. The thieves of the world want to call people thieves. Projection. And that's what Richard Frederick was doing right there. Kenny Anthony goes on to say, these statements and innuendos made by Mr. Frederick were dishonestly crafted and calculated to inflict political damage on my character, integrity, and reputation, well knowing that the general election is due. As Prime Minister of St. Lucia, I would be in a serious dereliction of my duties and obligations to the people and state of St. Lucia if I simply ignored the statements or recklessness of the media houses and personnel who published them. How can St. Lucians trust in my integrity if they were made to believe I was connected to a drug trafficking offense? He goes on to say, I have instructed my attorneys, Anthony Astefan and Peter Foster, to proceed to commence legal proceedings against Mr. Richard Frederick for defamation forthwith and to prosecute the claim expeditiously. I have also instructed my attorneys to institute proceedings against those media houses and personnel who published the defamatory statements. It is my view that no responsible journalist acting honestly would have broadcast or published the statements by Richard Frederick. Those who published the statements made by Richard Frederick knew or ought to have known that the statements were false and did so recklessly, and in order to injure my reputation as Prime Minister of St. Lucia and political leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party, I simply cannot continue to ignore such flagrant assault on my integrity. It will now be a matter for the courts where Richard Frederick will either have to put up or to shut up. Let's get to the matter of the visa revocation. I am going through this methodically. I am going through this surgically. I am going through this surgically. I am dealing with matter by matter by matter. We are now moving to the issue of the visa revocation. I'm going to link all of it. Let's get to the matter of the visa revocation. Let me get this video. I want you to hear this for yourself. Folks, I want you to hear this. This was a campaign ad put out by the St. Lucia Labour Party in 2011. Hear for yourself what the St. Lucia Labour Party, and let me remind you that today Richard Frederick sits in a cabinet of the St. Lucia Labour Party. Let me remind you of what they said.
The US would revoke a US
Let
diplomatic
me
visa.
remind you.
Terrorist
Hold on.
These are the reasons why the US would revoke a US diplomatic visa. Terrorist activity, drug trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering. Which one of these applies to Richard Frederick? Stevenson King says this is not serious. We know it is serious. Let's put an end to this embarrassment. Vote for the St. Lucia Labour Party.
That is the St. Lucia Labour Party. But today they have him sitting in their House of Parliament, in their cabinet. This is the St. Lucia Labour Party. Let me play this for you, because you need to remind them of the positions they have held. You need to remind them. Let me play this for you. I want you all to listen. I want you all to listen. I want you all to listen.
The main opposition St. Lucia Labour Party considers the revocation of the housing minister's US visa a national concern. SLP spokesperson J.D. Shapir Emmanuel says the party is alarmed by attempts from the ruling party to belittle the issue. The SLP spokesperson considers that while visitor visas are revoked on a regular basis, the revocation of a diplomatic visa calls for explanation. Further, a speedy investigation is needed into the matter.
Mr. Frederick should explain why he did not ask for reasons at the time he claims to have called the embassy to confirm that his visas had been revoked. Prime Minister King must not use his usual delay tactics by suggesting that he has asked our mission in Washington to investigate the reasons for such drastic action by the US against a member of his cabinet.
Emmanuel and the St. Lucia Labour Party also criticized the Prime Minister's handling of the issue. She says the Prime Minister has greater access to information and should seek clarification from the US authorities so he can in turn explain to the populace. The statement went further to call for the removal of the Housing Minister and Castries Central MP.
The implications of this matter are far-reaching. The name and reputation of our country are at stake. Every St. Lucian citizen living at home or abroad has every right and reason to be concerned. Prime Minister King must act now. As Prime Minister, he needs to do the right thing for the good of this nation and remove Richard Frederick or call the elections immediately.
The St. Lucia Labour Party has also requested an explanation from the Prime Minister in relation to Janine Compton-Antoine's 2008 investigative trip to Barbados. The Mico North MP says she went to Barbados during what was a leadership struggle within the ruling UWP government on the behest of the Prime Minister. There she met with US officials, including the FBI and CIA, where External Affairs Minister Rufus Busquet and the Housing Minister were discussed. Sant Justin, HTS News, Channel 4.
I wonder if JD and Kenny Anthony thinks that Pip needs to act now. That's what Paul Ward says. Paul Ward is in the comments. This is Minerva Ward. But somehow Richard, in his crazy mind, suggests that Paul Ward and Minerva Ward are the same. I'm reading Paul Ward's comment in the chat, and Minerva Ward is talking. Paul Ward said, I wonder if Jada thinks Pip needs to act now also. I wonder if Kenny Anthony and Jada think that Pip needs to act. And let me explain to you guys. This was the Labour Party's position in 2011 when Richard Frederick's visa was revoked. And they told us why. And they're right. Because I did extensive research today about why the visa, a diplomatic visa, would be revoked. And more so, listen to me carefully. Today I was doing my research because I wanted to come here prepared. You see, I come with my documents. I come with measly documents, and I laid out in piles. So I wanted to be organized to come here tonight. I did my research today. There are very specific reasons that the US will revoke a diplomatic visa. Personal visas, you can lose your personal visa for different reasons. You're driving under the influence of alcohol, you can lose your thing. A diplomatic visa is a much higher level of care and scrutiny. Because when the US revokes a diplomatic visa, they are also possibly jeopardizing diplomatic relationships with that country. So there's a higher level. It is even higher when this person is a public official. It is even higher when this person is a public official, like Richard was. Richard was a sitting government minister whose diplomatic visa was revoked. Listen, this was not willy-nilly. This was not willy-nilly. This was not an arbitrary somebody go and complain to the embassy and say Richard Frederick dealing drugs and this thing is visa. That is not how it happened. From what I read on the US's website, there is a much higher level of duty, of care, and of scrutiny to revoke the diplomatic visa of a sitting government minister. So do not let Richard Frederick fool you all. He like to cry and say, oh, political victimization. Can he send Janine to come turn to the embassy? They tell the embassy rumors and the embassy revoke my visa. Betties! Complete nonsense. The US does not revoke diplomatic visas like that, especially not for a sitting government minister. Folks, did you all know that Richard Frederick attempted to sue the US government for the revocation of his visa? Did you all know, folks, listen to me carefully, did you all know that Richard Frederick attempted to sue the US government for the revocation of his visa? And his case was dismissed. Richard Frederick attempted to sue the US government for $25 million for the revocation of his visa, and his case was dismissed. You want documents? You want documents? You want documents? Richard Frederick attempted to sue the US government for the $25 million Listen, the US dismissed that case so much. But let me tell you something. A lawyer eats Richard money. A lawyer eats his money. And let me tell you something. You said Trini lawyer, he hired for a lawsuit against me for defamation. Eat his money too. Eat his money. Eat it, my. Eat his money. You're too stupid. They man kuyo. You suing the US government for $25 million because they revoke your visa? Kuyo. A lawyer eat your money in the States. That Trini lawyer, I heard the Trini lawyers hungry more than anything else. I heard the Trini lawyers desperate for work. They're taking any work they get. Even if they know that lawsuits are making no sense, they're taking it. Let me tell you something. What's his name? Anand Raghu. What's his name again? Anand, what's his name? I had his name there. What's his name? Anand Ramlogan. Amanand Ramlogan, eat his money. Eat his money. Make him fly all to St. Lucia. Come for the jazz festival. Enjoy the jazz festival. Make sure you'll time your trip around the jazz festival. Make him pay for a nice hotel for y'all. Come for the jazz festival. Make him give you a VIP ticket to the jazz festival. Come and enjoy my beautiful St. Lucia. Come and enjoy beautiful St. Lucia. Make sure you organize it at the same time as the jazz festival, okay? Take my advice, okay? Organize it, St. Lucia. It will be nice. Make him give you all VIP tickets for everything. Deban Ku, you're stupid. And eat his money, too stupid. Eat his money. Deban Ku, you're. So according to this document, where former St. Lucia minister sues over U.S. visa revocation. It says, and this is February 27th, 2014. It says, on Tuesday, attorneys of former St. Lucia housing minister Richard Frederick filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., claiming compensatory and punitive damages of $25 million in relation to the revocation of 2011 of his diplomatic and non-immigrant U.S. visas. It names the defendants in the case. Some of them were embassy staff in Barbados. There was one St. Lucian, Gregory de Turville, the head of security for the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Remember the Prime Minister of St. Lucia at the time. Okay, Gregory de Turville, the head of security for the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Are they talking about the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Stephenson King, when his visa was revoked? Or are they talking about the head of security, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, when that case was filed, Kenny Anthony, in 2014? Either way, it's either the head of security for Stephenson King or Kenny Anthony. Take your pick. As previously reported, it is believed that Frederick's visa was revoked as a result of false information supplied by members of the St. Lucia Labour Party, then in opposition. It's previously reported, it is believed that Richard's visa was revoked as a result of false information. Somebody always lie on Richard. Somebody always lie on Richard. Richard is always the victim. Always the victim. Somebody always have an agenda for him. He's always the victim. Poor jab, Richard. As previously reported, it is believed that Frederick's visa was revoked as a result of false information supplied by members of the St. Lucia Labour Party, then in opposition. The same people he are sitting in cabinet with today. The same people he are sitting in cabinet with today. The same people he is sitting in cabinet with today. Richard Frederick is not Alan Chasney that had your visa revoked. Let me go on. Yes. So, Richard Frederick. Richard's daughter. Richard's first daughter. Beautiful young lady. Bright. She's a doctor in the US. She's done fantastic for herself. She is fantastic. She's been on different media around talking about medicine, especially during COVID. I have the utmost regard for her. Very bright, intelligent, well-spoken young lady who has done well for herself. Utmost regard for Regina Bissett. She's done very well for herself. American citizen. She had filed for papers for Richard before his visa was revoked. She had filed for his papers as her father before his visa was revoked, but the papers had not been processed yet. So in March of 2013, she follows up. She follows up after his visa was revoked. She follows up after his visa was revoked. And this is the letter written on March 18th, 2013. It comes from the United States Department of State. This is the letter. This is the letter. You'll see? Not only Richard that can come with documents, and coming with documents too. It's addressed to Miss Regina Darcel Bissett, 5281 Kim Court, West Palm Beach. Dear Miss Bissett, I want you all to listen to this letter, the words of this letter, very carefully. Very carefully. If your popcorn finished, go and get more. If your wine finished, go and get more. Okay? Dear Miss Bissett, I am writing in response to your November 26, 2012 letter to the Department of Homeland Security regarding the immigrant visa application for your father. So after his visa was revoked, she's writing to the Department of Homeland Security asking about his visa application for her father, Richard Frederick. Because the Department of State is responsible for visa matters, your letter was forwarded to us for our reply. Thank you for your patience in awaiting our reply. Unfortunately, there is little we can add beyond the information you have already received from the U.S. Embassy in Bridgetown, Barbados. So, in other words, this was not her first inquiry. She had inquired to the U.S. Embassy in Bridgetown, Barbados. So she had already received an answer. She had already received an answer from the U.S. Embassy in Bridgetown, Barbados. So they're saying to her, there is little they can add beyond the information they've already provided. The U.S. Embassy in Bridgetown, Barbados has already provided. And this letter is coming from Washington, D.C. So if people believe that the systems are not integrated, that she can go to the embassy in Barbados and ask a question and the embassy in Washington will not know. Let me tell you something. The systems are very, very, very much integrated. The US and Canada, the systems talk. Okay? A lot of those systems, they speak through Interpol. Very, very much connected. Do not think you can have a criminal matter in the UK and try to come into the US or Canada and they can see everything that happened in the system. There's a certain St. Lucian, I will not mention her name. There's a certain St. Lucian who filed false charges of physical abuse on her husband in the UK. St. Lucian. She tried to file for refugee status in Canada, and it was declined because the Canada saw in the system that the allegation she made of domestic violence was false. It was rejected. And once they reject your application like that, you cannot come back into Canada. And once Canada has flagged you, the US has flagged you as well. So she goes and asks Barbados for a status of her father's application. She doesn't get the response she's looking for. She goes and asks the embassy in Washington, and they tell her this. They can't tell her anything more than Barbados told her. Visa applications are adjudicated in accordance with criteria specified in the Immigration and Nationality Act. The authority to issue or refuse visas is vested solely in consular offices abroad by Section 104A of the whatever. Our review of the department records found that Mr. Frederick was interviewed. Listen to this. Our review of the department records found that Mr. Frederick was interviewed for an immigrant visa on October 9th, 2012. So after his visa was revoked, he applied again and was interviewed on October 9th, 2012. I don't know. I don't know how many times the US must tell Richard Frederick they don't want him. Like how many times? When people say, what the US have Richard Frederick want to be there? Richard Frederick has applied so many times to get back to the US. There, he's applied for a UN persona non grata visa. He tried to sue the US to get his visa back. All kinds of things. In what other language must the US tell Richard they don't want him in their country? In what other language must the US tell Richard they don't want him in their country? Our review of the department records found that Mr. Frederick was interviewed for an immigrant visa on October 9, 2012. After the interview and a thorough review of the visa application, the interviewing consular officer determined that Mr. Frederick was ineligible. So after he interviewed her, after his visa was revoked, he applied again. They interviewed him. They found that he's ineligible to receive a visa under section 2.212 2128 because of his inadmissibility finding. Because of this inadmissibility finding, Mr. Écoutez bien. Let me drink my water. Listen to this sentence. Because of this inadmissibility finding, Mr. Frederick is permanently ineligible to receive a visa, and no further processing can occur on this case. I regret our response cannot be more positive, but trust this information is helpful. Sincerely, Jeff Granger, Division Chief, Public Inquiries Division, Visa Services. In more ways than the U.S. tell Richard Frederick, he is not welcome on their soil. And this St. Lucia Labour Party government, this St. Lucia Labour Party government puts the name and reputation of St. Lucia in jeopardy by applying when they know the U.S. has revoked his visas and have rejected every application he's put in since then, has dismissed his lawsuit. They put the reputation of our country, they put the reputation of St. Lucia in jeopardy by applying for a persona non grata visa for Richard to attend the UN for what? They put the reputation of St. Lucia in jeopardy to apply for a visa that only the world's dictators apply for to attend the UN. And for what reason? For what reason? There's an article I'm looking for. Let me find it. There's an article I want to show you. For what reason? Richard was supposedly going to the UN to deliver a speech on behalf of CARICOM. Has anybody heard that speech he supposedly delivered to CARICOM? Has anybody heard that speech he supposedly delivered to the UN on behalf of CARICOM? What the heck? What in Jesus' name would a minister of housing be needing to go to the UN General Assembly for, to the extent that St. Lucia would put our country's name in jeopardy with the US by applying for a persona non grata visa, the kind the world's dictators, despots, rejected people get? That is the kind of visa that the world's, like I said, those who have been rejected, they're dictators. The US doesn't want to see them, no way, no how. They cannot get into US soil. But by virtue of them going to the UN, their countries apply for a UN visa for them to go to the UN. Why would a minister of housing need to be at the UN? So much so that our country, our Prime Minister, Philip Pierre, this Labour Party government, would put the name and reputation of our sweet St. Lucia on the line to apply for a persona non grata visa for Richard Frederick. Why in Jesus' name? You know, see this government playing their ass. And on top of that, he overstays that 3-day visa. On top of that, he overstays that 3-day visa. He came and say I lied. He came and say I lied. Richard overstayed his 3-day visa. To try to prove a point. The US has told St. Lucia. He's saying a lie? The US has told St. Lucia on no uncertain terms, don't ever apply for another visa for this guy. Not for UN, not for anything else. Richard can never, ever go back to US soil. Richard, hear me clearly when I tell you this. Hear me clearly when I tell you all this. Richard can never again walk on American soil, not even to the UN. Richard can never walk on American soil again, not even to the UN, because not even that visa he will get. Do not worry if Richard tell you nonsense about he never had a 3-day visa. Richard does not have a multiple indefinite visa. Richard was not given a visa. Richard cannot go back to the US. He cannot. Do not let Richard fool you. He cannot. And I'm waiting for my day in court. I am waiting for my day in court. Richard, I'm waiting for my day in court. Let's move on to the bank accounts. Let's move on to the bank accounts. I want to play this video for y'all. I want y'all to listen. I want y'all to listen to Richard trying to explain. And let me tell you something. I want y'all to open your eyes and to think. Put on your thinking caps. Richard Frederick comes on his show and all of a sudden, that information was not out there in the public domain. It was not put out to BWP. It was not put out by the opposition. I don't think there was anybody who was aware of what was going on. And I don't think anybody knew that. Richard came on his show and put out information that his bank account was closed in 2021, July of 2021. He put out the information. Nobody asked him. Nobody asked him. Nobody asked him. He come on his show. I talked in my St. Lucian palace. Nobody asked him. He come on his show. And he take in front. How else said in patois? Pour du vent avant du point. He take in front. Because something is coming. The only reason Richard would reveal this almost 2 years later is because something is coming. And he take it in front to try to create an excuse for whatever is going to be revealed. I don't know. And Richard is so lied. He is such a liar. He is such a liar. His justification for this is that this was politically motivated and happened before the election to cause him some kind of problems before the election. That never came out. Up to a day like today, it never came out. He put it out there. He put it out there. He take in front for whatever is coming. The question is why he put it out there. Why he chose to put it out there now. Nobody asked him. That I have never seen or heard that in the public domain. Nowhere. But all of a sudden you come and tell us that your bank account was closed by a Bank of St. Lucia. Why you come and tell us that now? Why you come and tell us that now? Is there something coming that you're taking in front for? Is there something coming that you're taking in front for? So you come and tell us and make an excuse. And making excuses, and as usual, playing the victim. Somebody always doing you something. You never know why, and somebody always doing you something. So you taking in front before whatever it is have to come out. Because you're expecting something to come out. That's why you came and told us. I want you to listen to his excuses. Listen to this.
to the general elections of 2021. But in the lead to the general elections of 2021, I got a call and the people at Bank of St.Lucia are nasty. And I say it without reservation, nasty, not all of them.
Listen to this, sir. This is a government minister. And listen to how Richard attacks people, anybody, any institution, even the bank manager. Richard attacks in a worse way. And today he wants to come and have a lawsuit, bring a team of lawyers from Trinidad, from Minerva. You see Richard is a pappy show? You see Richard is an idiot? You see Richard is a fool? Do you have clean hands, Richard? Do you have clean hands? Listen to how he describes Bank of St. Lucia. Listen to this.
But in the lead to the general elections of 2021, I got a call and the people at Bank of St. Lucia are nasty. And I say it without reservation.
Listen to this.
Nasty, not all of them.
You hear?
Some of them in management.
You hear?
I got a call from a senior manager, Mr. Frederick, a female that was. Instructions have been given to close your account. That's on the eve of elections, eh?
Listen to that. Listen to him.
So I said, just so. I asked why and by whom. They did not.
He never know why. Always the victim. Just so he asks why. He never knows why. Just like his visa, he never know why his visa was revoked. Now he never knows why his bank account is being closed. It's always something politically motivated according to him. Richard thinks we are fools. He thinks we are fools.
See? But in the...
Let me play this again.
But in the lead to the general elections of 2021, I got a call and the people at Bank of St. Lucia are nasty. And I say it without reservation, nasty.
Government minister. This is a government minister.
Management.
This is a government
I
minister.
got a call from a senior manager, Mr. Frederick, a female that was. Instructions have been given to close your account. That's on the eve of elections. Eh?
Yeah, he's trying to make it political. He's trying to
So
make
I
it
said,
political.
I ask why and by whom.
He never knows. He never
They
knows.
did not say.
Never knows.
But what I said was, I asked, can I speak to the general manager of the bank? I did not know the individual's name, but I was furnished with his name. And when I was greeted with this unfortunate, unjustified news, I called the office of Rule for whatever his name
Listen
is.
to him.
Phillips.
Listen to him.
His
Papi
office.
showed a bank manager. Listen to him. Papi showed a bank
I
manager.
called him no less than 10 times before the elections to attempt to make an appointment to see him. Not only did I not get an appointment, but he did not even have the courtesy of returning my call. Lo and behold, on June 16th, 2021, you all know how I do it. I always show. I don't only speak, I show. At the time, Frank Myers
Listen
was
to
the
this.
chairman
Listen to
of
this.
Caucus.
Listen to this. Listen to this. Look at him. Listen to Richard looking for a scapegoat. Listen to Richard looking for a scapegoat. Listen to this. Look into how he wants to politicize everything. So everything that happens, his visa will get revoked. His visa got revoked. He blamed the Labour Party. He made it about politics. His bank account gets closed at Bank of St. Lucia. He tries to find some way of connecting to politics. Listen to this. Listen to the disingenuity of Richard Frederick. Always the freaking victim, can never take ownership for his own actions.
I am not saying he's involved.
You hear? Listen, you see how he is there? Listen to him. Richard is very cunning. Richard is very cunning. So he makes sure he stays within the bounds of what can be considered defamatory. So he puts it out there that Frank Myers is the chairman of the Bank of St. Lucia. He's not saying he's involved, but he's putting it out there to lead you to believe that he is. Richard, who you think you're fooling? Who do you think you're fooling? You take us for idiots? You take us for idiots. You throwing it out there looking for a scapegoat. So Frank Myers was the chairman of Bank of St. Lucia. So you putting it out there that he was, and then you come in and say, you're not saying he was involved, but you put it out there to lead people to the conclusion that he was. Who you think you're fooling, Richard? Do you take us for fools? Like the people who under your live every Thursday? Do you think we're fools? Because we're not.
But in my mind, politics had something to do with it.
You have? Let me play this again for you. I want you guys to hear this.
Lo and behold, on June 16th, 2021, you all know how I do it. I always show. I don't only speak, I show. At the time, Frank Myers was the chairman of Bank of
Listen to how cunning he is and deceptive.
I am not saying he's involved, but in my mind, politics had something to do with it.
Listen to how deceptive he is.
On the 16th of June, having maintained for things with the bank, 16th of June 2021, a month and 10 days before the elections, I got a letter from the said manager. A month and 10 days. And in my mind, somebody wants to give the opposition, wanted to give the then government ammunition on me.
Listen to that, guys. So he is making the case. Richard Frederick is making the case that this was politically motivated and it was done on the eve of the last election to give the opposition some kind of case on him. Meanwhile, that has never come out up to a day like today. He's the one who just brought it out last week or week before. If this was supposed to be politically motivated and done strategically just for election to give the opposition something on you, how come it never came out? Who you think you fooling, Richard? Who you think you are fooling? Stop taking us for idiots.
I got a letter. Show them the letter. The letter, please. Good. June 16th, 2021. Dear Mr. Frederick, following a review of account, the management. Lord.
So he's trying to make this political. Y'all, you see this document? I got this from ECCB. I got this from ECCB. Listen, this is the process. This is the process. ECCB mandates when any of their banks, including Bank of St. Lucia, there is a reason to believe that an account is being used for money laundering. This is what ECCB says, not me. ECCB. There are different steps it takes. Financial institutions should keep records on customer identification, copies of records, blah blah blah, passports, identity cards, driver's licenses, account files, business correspondence for at least 5 years after the account is closed. These documents should be available to domestic law enforcement authorities in the context of relevant criminal prosecutions and investigations. Financial institutions should review and properly document the background and purpose of all complex, unusual, large transactions and also unusual patterns of transactions which have no apparent economic or visible lawful purpose. If financial institutions suspect that any transaction or customer may form part of a criminal activity or otherwise constitutes a suspicious activity, they should report their suspicions to the law enforcement authorities forthwith. So they're saying, ECCB is saying to the banks that if they suspect any transaction by a customer may form part of a criminal activity or otherwise constitute a suspicious activity, they should report their suspicions to the law enforcement authorities forthwith. Financial institutions, the directors and employees should not warn their customers because he said he was not aware. They should not warn their customers when information on suspicious activities relating to them is being reported to law enforcement authorities. So they're saying the bank should not tell them that they are reporting them to the police. Financial institutions which report their suspicions should follow the instructions from and otherwise cooperate fully with law enforcement authorities. Listen to this last one, which is what happened to Richard. When a financial institution chooses to make no report to the law enforcement authorities, well, I should not say that. I should not say this is what happened to Richard because I have no idea if they made a report to the law enforcement or not. I have no idea. They might have very well have, and it may not be public, so I don't know. So let me retract that. But when a financial institution chooses to make no report to the law enforcement authorities on the suspicious activities of one of its customers, it should sever relations with the customer and close all his accounts forthwith in their own interest. When a financial institution chooses to make no report, so they can make a report to law enforcement or they can make no report. So when a financial institution chooses to make no report to the law enforcement authorities on the suspicious activities of one of its customers, it should sever relations with the customer and close all his accounts forthwith in their own interests. ECCB folks. ECCB. So you can stay and believe that Richard is a victim. Always a victim. Always a victim. Always a victim. You can stay and believe that he's a victim. And the bank had no reason other than to put this out for political mileage before election. Yet it has never come out. It has never come out. But he would have you all believe it was put out, was done before the election for political mileage. Yet it has never come out. If you all want to be idiot, you all can be idiot. I'm not idiot. I know that we've been on for just 2 hours now. I'm going to go quickly to the rest. I'm going to go very, very quickly through the rest. Richard, there has been a number of cases. I've read you the letter from Kenny Anthony about Richard's defamation. There's a 2017 post from Felicia Brown where she's admonishing him for his attacks on women. Richard is on his show every Thursday defaming people and attacking people and maligning people. He's attacked me. He's attacked Kanisha Flavian. He's brought a copy of her brother's contract on his show and said it was her, that the government has given a contract. He's shown bank records of somebody whose name he got mixed up in his haste to go after Alan Chasney. He went after somebody working in Alan Chasney's office. Got the wrong person, put the person's banking information on his show. He's repeatedly on Alan Chasney. I think Alan Chasney probably has about 3 or 4 defamation lawsuits going for Richard Frederick. But today he wants to come and act. He wants to be on his perch shouting defamation for Minerva. When you have defamed me, your hands are not clean. Agnes Francis sued you some time ago for defamation. sued you, Richard Frederick, Agnes Francis, for defamation. You don't have clean hands. You have attacked Marvin Charles. You've attacked so many people. Every Thursday, literally, instead of coming and talk about what the government is doing, the achievements of the government, you come and attack anybody who challenges you. You use that show not to help anybody, but to berate people who challenge you. But today you want to come and scream on your perch about defamation when you defame every Thursday. I also want to speak about Richard's criminal activities. Let me get some water, just 1 second. Richard has taken umbrage to the fact that I have said he's a criminal. Richard has taken umbrage to the fact that I have said that he's a criminal. Folks, that is exactly what Richard Frederick is. Richard has been criminally charged. Richard has been criminally charged. Let me say this. Truth is a defense for defamation. If what I say is true, it can be defamation. If I call you a criminal and it's true, there's no defamation. You have been criminally charged already, Richard. You have been criminally charged for firing your gun into a neighbor's property at Corinth Estate. You have been criminally charged for it. Firing into your neighbor's water tank. There's a dispute. There was a dispute. You pulled out your gun and shot into your neighbor's property, hitting their water tank. You had to pay charges. You had to pay them charges. Richard, do you remember Luska? She's deceased now. Luska. You shot at their water tank. You were charged for it, Richard. Where's the defamation? Where is the defamation? Where is the defamation? Let me show you another video of Richard kicking a vehicle belonging to a police officer outside Baywalk Mall. Let me show you that video. When I call you criminal, it's a criminal. Kicking somebody's property is a criminal matter. This has no volume on it, but I hope you can see it. Do you know this video? It's outside Baywalk Mall. He goes into the face of the police officer. They're trying to restrain him. His friends, the lady is pulling him off. The lady is pulling him off. The lady is pulling him off. Because he's up, his temper is up there. He's hot. But the camera caught him kicking the vehicle belonging to a police officer. Watch again. Watch again. Watch again. This is Richard Frederick. Watch again. Watch again. Watch again. Watch again. I want you all to see that part. I want you all to see the part where he's kicking the car of the police officer. Look, you see? That's Richard Frederick. That's Richard Frederick. That is Richard Frederick. Folks, Richard went on his show. Richard went on his show. Richard went on his show. And he bashed every single person involved in the customs matter. Do you all remember when Richard Frederick was arrested by customs? I think it was 2008. Do you all remember that incident? Richard went on his show and he bashed everybody involved in that, from the customs controller to Nicholas Frederick, who was the Attorney General at the time, who he bashed the arresting officer. He bashed everybody talking about karma as if he's innocent. As if he is innocent. Richard Frederick, let me ask you some questions. I'm asking some questions. I'm not making statements. I'm asking you some questions. Yes, the matters were dropped. The charges were dropped. And yes, the then government, your government, because you were in Stephenson King's UWP at the time, and they had to pay you $50,000. The charges were dropped, and they had to pay you costs. Charges being dropped does not mean you are innocent. It means the charges were dropped. Or even if you're found not guilty, it doesn't mean that you're innocent. Now listen to me carefully. Listen to me carefully. I am not saying anything. I am telling you what I saw with my own two eyes. I want you all to listen to me carefully. I want you all to listen to me carefully. This is what I witnessed with my own two eyes. And I am not saying that Richard Frederick under-invoiced vehicles. Écoutez-moi bien. I am not saying that Richard Frederick under-invoiced vehicles. But listen to me clearly. This is what I witnessed with my own two eyes. I worked at a bank. I worked at a bank in St. Lucia. And I can tell you what I witnessed for myself. I worked at a bank and I witnessed bank officers, 2 bank officers, destroying the loan documents of Richard Frederick when customs was coming to investigate vehicles for under invoicing. And what they were trying to destroy was the manufacture date of those vehicles, because the manufacture date will give an indication of the value of the vehicle. So they did not want customs, his friends at the bank did not want customs, who was coming to investigate, to see the manufacture date on the vehicles. Because apparently, and I'm using the word apparently, what was told to customs was a much earlier year. So what was told to customs apparently was that it was a much older vehicle. So I witnessed with my own two eyes. I didn't hear this. I witnessed with my own two eyes loan documents of his being destroyed by his friends in the bank, 2 officers, when customs was coming to investigate. So when you want, let me tread very carefully here what I say. Anyway, let me leave that alone. Let me leave that alone. To wrap up, I will wrap up right now. And I will say, let me make this clear. Let me send a message to St. Lucians that Canada, the UK, the US, they are watching St. Lucia closely with what is going on. They are watching St. Lucia closely. This application for UN persona non grata visa did not help our case. The sale of our CIP passports to countries like Iran is not helping our case. And speaking of CIP, let me just digress for a second. $51.8 million in CIP receipts that have not been accounted for to the Parliament of St. Lucia. $51.8 million that have not been accounted for to the Parliament of St. Lucia. Not a word. Not a word. Not a word. And there is a secret deal with one CIP agent. One. Everything is being channeled through that CIP agent. Ask yourself who. Ask yourself which of the CIP agents. Go on to CIP St. Lucia, see their authorized agents, and look, and you will see exactly where it's being channeled to. I'm not calling no names. Go and think for yourself. But we are under the scrutiny and the microscope, and it's going to make our visa situation, the people who need visas, it's going to make it very difficult for you. That's one caution I'm going to give. The second one is for the police in St. Lucia. I support the police. There are a lot of good and hard-working police officers in St. Lucia. But there are a handful of corrupt police officers. There are a handful of corrupt police officers in St. Lucia. And let me tell you something. Let me put you on warning. That I have heard certain leaked. Let me be very careful what I say. Phones have been compromised. Phones have been compromised. And I have heard certain recordings. And I have seen a list of certain names of police officers who share information about criminal activity, who share classified information. With Richard Frederick. The police officers who are doing that, the police officers who are going and share classified information, the police officers, the handful of police officers who are going and sharing classified information and jeopardizing classified information. Your names are on a list. Richard Frederick on his show last week. He made the statement that when a certain officer, Jan Gustav, had gone to his seniors for matters which Richard Frederick, he believed, could potentially be criminally charged for, these same officers, these same sergeants went right back and tell him, Richard Frederick, a government minister who went on his show to admit that the police had been compromised, that they were coming back to him. with information that another police officer had shared with them. If a police cannot make a report to a senior officer without it going back outside the force, what confidence can we ever have with our police? If a handful of police officers, I'm not saying all, I support our police 100%. It's a handful. One bad apple spoils a whole bit. A handful of police officers, a government minister. When we are trying our best to instill trust and confidence in our police, he goes on his show and admits that police officers, senior police officers, came back to him and told him that another police officer had made a report against him. How can the public ever trust the police? Y'all can create all the line y'all want and say it will not go back out. Who will ever trust that when a government minister can come and brag on his show that senior police officers call him right away and tell him? Y'all don't see that's a problem? Y'all don't see that's a problem? Both the police and the government minister? I want to challenge St. Lucians tonight. I want to challenge St. Lucians about the people we elect to our house. I want to challenge St. Lucians about the people we elect. And they say, oh, he working for the people, he working for the people, he working for the people. He working for the people. He build a drain there, he build a sidewalk there, he build a shack there, he build a this there. He working for the people. Leave the man alone, he working for the people. He working for the people. So forget everything I have said there to you tonight. I want to challenge St. Lucians that we need to do better in the people we elect to our house, our honorable house. We need to do better. These elements should never be in our honorable house, much less sit in cabinet. I want to challenge Philip Pierre. I want to challenge Philip Pierre. And in challenging him, I want to read this. Somebody sent me this. It is indeed concerning that a disgraced government minister, Richard Frederick, was allowed to hold a position of power in the St. Lucia government. Former St. Lucia Prime Minister Kenny Anthony's admonitions that Frederick is the scariest thing to enter St. Lucian politics should have been taken seriously by the current Prime Minister, Philip Pierre. Furthermore, the revocation of Richard Frederick's personal and U.S. personal and diplomatic visas indicates serious misconduct on his part, as the U.S. government would not take such actions without substantial evidence of wrongdoing. It is crucial for elected officials to hold themselves to a higher standard of ethics and integrity, and the fact that Richard Frederick's behavior was egregious enough to warrant such action is deeply concerning, despite the fact that it will have us to believe that it is politically motivated. The U.S. does not take these actions lightly. In addition, the Bank of St. Lucia's closure of Richard Frederick's accounts for international anti-money laundering laws is a reflection of the global effort to combat financial crimes. Anti-money laundering laws are designed to prevent criminals from using financial institutions to launder their illicit funds. The closure of Frederick's accounts suggests that the bank had reason to believe that his accounts were being used for illicit purposes, and the bank has taken appropriate action to comply with its international laws. This is a serious matter that should not be taken lightly. This matter should not be swept under the rug and should be investigated thoroughly. It is important for political leaders to ensure that their government is free of unsavory characters like Richard Frederick. Upholding high ethical standards and integrity is crucial to maintaining the trust of citizens and international community. It is imperative that you, Philip Pierre, take action to address the situation. It is not enough to simply ignore the dark cloud over the head of Richard Frederick, firstly with his visa revocation, and now with an ECCB-regulated commercial bank suddenly closing his account. You must take concrete steps to ensure that those who hold positions of power in your government are of the highest integrity and meet the standards expected of them by the international community. This person says, Philippe, I urge you to listen to the admonitions of the former Prime Minister Kenny Anthony and to take decisive action to ensure individuals like Richard Frederick are not given a platform to advance their interests at the expense of the people. Folks, tonight, I want to challenge every single one of you. Every single one of you. I want to challenge every single one of you. Richard Frederick behaves like he's a bully, that anybody who challenges him, he wants to come and threaten and intimidate. That threat of a lawsuit, listen, that's a puppy show. That is a puppy show. Anybody who, listen, any lawyer, you don't have to be a lawyer. Anybody who understands the basic thresholds of defamation know that Richard doesn't have a case. Richard is a puppy show. Richard is a puppy show. Okay? So this ain't going nowhere. If a Trini lawyer wants to eat his money. But that ain't going nowhere. This is intimidation tactics. And I'm telling you, if a government needs to threaten and intimidate its citizens with lawsuits and threats of lawsuits to keep us in our place and to beat us into submission, they have already lost. I am challenging all St. Lucians, all of you, to stand up to this tonight. Stand up to Richard Frederick and to stand up to this any attempt to bully and intimidate. You are St. Lucian citizen and you have every right to hold a government accountable and to challenge the government and to ask questions of the government. And if something's not right, to say so. Okay? And to not be fooled by attempts to come and tell you it's politically motivated when you know better, when I know better, and when we all know better. Stand up to this. Stand up to it. Do not cower. Do not be afraid. God didn't give you a spirit of fear. He gave you a spirit of boldness. Stand up to it. St. Lucians, I leave you tonight. And have a good night, everybody. Have a fantastic night. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to me tonight. Thank you for coming out. We were 2,400 views going strong tonight. And I think the interest is in hearing people call out this government and they're bullying and the ministers who are nothing there but to bully people. And that's what I did tonight. And I want everybody to ensure that they do the same. Do not cower for these guys.